Is tipping a scam? Well, it can be, and I'll give you two examples where I believe I was scammed while tipping. You can be the judge. I was at a bar in New York, I had a few drinks, and it came time to pay. And they placed the card reader in front of me, and in US, you usually get these ridiculous numbers that prompt you to give a tip. Usually it's like 20, 25, even 30%. So to my shock, they placed the terminal in front of me and it said, do you want to tip 7, 5, or 3%? I was like, wow, that's really nice of you. And since it was a bar where I had to pay to enter because it was a comedy club, I was like, well, I guess they already got the money for the entrance and the beer is kind of expensive for $12. So they don't require a tip, which was kind of nice. So I was like, well, let me tip you 7% because you're being fair to me. And then I looked at the total I just paid. I was like, wait, if a beer is $12, I had 4, and my total is $63, $64, that doesn't add up. And it didn't. These guys have already added tip to my total, and a pretty generous tip of 27%. And on top of that, they were asking for additional tip of 7%, which seemed nice. So in total, they charged me 33% tip. And also I paid the entrance and so on, and crazy price for a beer. By the way, I was so upset I actually left a review for this comedy club, and I said the comedy was good, but what kind of comedy you played on me? This is ridiculous. And they replied in the standard way like, hey, look, you're a tourist, you don't understand how it works in Manhattan, beers are expensive, and we tip 33%. Bullshit. I know a bar just 2 streets off where your bar is, and it's like $4 a beer, and I tip $1 a drink. And actually, it's even cheaper. I'm not gonna tell you where it is. I'm gonna keep that silent. Was I scammed? I was tricked, to say the least, on a silly tip trick. And you can actually be too here in Prague on a different example I'll give you. So you're paying, and the waiter will bring back a bunch of coins. And let's say you're from US, where the largest coin you have, I know you have a dollar coin, but you don't use it, is a quarter, right? So if you get a bunch of quarters, it's like, oh yeah, he just left $2 on the table, so I'll just let him keep it. But in this case, the waiter left you more than $10 in coins, but you don't know that because you're not familiar with the different currency with the different coins. And it's not the case of this place, just to be clear, but there are places in touristy areas in Europe that will do this exact trick. It goes for euro coins as well. We do have a €2 coin, and it's quite often and frequent that you will come across it. So if there's 5 coins, suddenly it's $10. Even Wikipedia got this wrong. When you go to the Gratuity page, they show an example of leaving some change on the table for the waiter, but the example they have is actually a 20% tip, which is pretty generous for Europe. Well, let's go to the very beginning of tipping. Why did we start to tip in the first place? Well, it was because someone provided an additional service on top of what she or he was supposed to do, what we were expecting. So they did something extra. Well, here's a little extra for you. So where's the problem with tipping? Well, it starts in the United States of America. If you have been to the United States, or if you live there, you probably are aware of the fact that when it comes time to pay, you'll be asked to leave a generous tip, no matter what the service really was. You will be prompted to tip 20 or more %. And if you're a first-time visitor to the US, this may come to you as a shock, but Americans are used to it. Mainly, not only used to it, but fine with it, because they know the person who's serving them in a restaurant works below minimum wage. So they have to supplement for whoever is paying the person, otherwise they'd live out of nothing. And here lies the entire problem of tipping in the United States, because when I said minimum wage, I'm not talking about $10, $15 minimum wage. I'm talking about 2.13 United States dollars. That is in many states the minimum wage for a worker that works in a tipping industry. $2.13 is lower than the minimum wage in Bulgaria and Romania. And this is not something I'm making up. This is from Department of Labor, a governmental institution in the United States. They have a website where they will say, minimum wage for tipped employees is $2.13. And it is in all these states. Alabama, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Nebraska, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, Wyoming, Delaware. Delaware's $2.23. Oh, so that's like, they're fine. In all these states, if you work in a food industry, you make less than I made 20 years ago here in Europe at McDonald's as a kid. That's ridiculous. As much as I would love to feel sorry for you, I'm not going to. That is your culture. That's how you treat employees. That is your style of living. We have it different in Europe. We pay employees minimum wage, which is higher than your minimum wage. But you live like that. But where the problem begins for us is when this meets. It's either when you travel here or when we travel there. So I was in Washington, D.C., and the waiter said, "Look, if you don't tip me, I make no money." I was like, wait, dude, but I didn't know this. I was 21 years old. I had very little money, less than he made. And he said, well, you have to tip me 20%. Otherwise, I'm broke. I was like, well, but I didn't know this. Like, I'm at a restaurant looking at a menu and the burger is $10, not $10 plus you have to tip the waiter and maybe the chef too. I don't know. So where do we draw the line? Which professions we do tip and which we don't tip? I actually asked my American cousin and she said, well, we only tip food-related jobs. Like, oh, okay, so when I go to Walmart to buy food, I tip the cashier. She goes like, no. Oh, okay, so when I fly across the ocean and the flight attendant brings me food, do I tip her? No. Like, okay, so that rule doesn't apply. Is there a different rule? Here's where I tipped in US where you're not supposed to tip. New Jersey is the last state where you cannot pump your own gas and somebody has to do it for you. And it was freezing cold and I watched the guy as he's pumping my gas and I tipped him because I felt bad for him. I was like, well, that's a shitty job and you have to pump my gas. So here's $1. And I told my family, I'm like, what? You must have been the first person in the world to tip him. I'm like, well, okay. So I thought that the tipping is for something extra, as I said in the beginning, as they say on Wikipedia. But no, it's not extra. They're just doing the job, but you have to pay extra just for that, just for the normal stuff. Now, how do Americans view us Europeans when we tip very little? Well, I've actually experienced it myself. I was in a large group and the person who was paying tipped very little and the waitress ran out and she said, what went wrong? And we, by the way, tipped 10%. She was like, well, you can't leave such a small tip. You guys were a large group. You have to tip more. So I was kind of doing the translation there. It was awkward for all of us. And then Honza found this. We need to ban Europeans from traveling here until they learn how to act because they only tipped me 10%. Or we can learn, you Americans, that you need to pay to people who do jobs. Culture differences, man. And once again, let me go back to the we pay for something we got extra. That's why we're giving extra. You'd think that tipping is for extraordinary service, right? Well, according to a study that I found, no, it is not. You tip more to women, men tip more to women. If they look good, they get higher tips. I mean, remember Hooters? I think they just ran out of business. They were based on that. Chesty women would serve you and they would get higher tips because they were chesty. Imagine if I would want to work in such industry. I'd be living off $2.13 an hour. Now, believe it or not, and I'm only talking to a small portion of the world now, there are countries where people do not tip. In some countries, only very few, it would be rude to tip, but in many countries, you simply do not tip. Since we have viewers from all around the world, we asked on our Instagram, Real Honest Guide, how much do they tip in their country? What is the custom? And we were pleased or surprised to find out that in many countries, Australia, Singapore, South Korea, Portugal, Finland, and maybe many more, you simply do not tip. There may be a tipping jar on the table, you may give some tip if you're super happy, but if you don't tip, nobody's gonna run after you on the street. Because you're like, well, if you don't tip me, I won't have money for rent. And now, despite the fact that our followers on Instagram said one thing, maybe a funny map on Reddit will say another thing, you as a viewer may have a third opinion. So please share it in the comments because it will only prove one more thing, and that is there's no rules for tipping, and I believe there shouldn't be. So if you're, let's say, from Australia, and you may say, well, I always tip 10%, and another person will say, well, I've never tipped and I never will, and the third person will say, well, no, we tip 20. Please share it below, because this is one of the videos where we're very much looking forward to the discussion under it. But let's talk about Prague, Czech Republic, where we tend to be experts on everything, me and Honza the Honest Guides. And what is the tipping culture and the tipping customs here? Because it is being changed by the foreigners coming here. If I'd ask my dad or my mom, how much do you tip? They would say, well, we round up to the closest 10 or to the closest 100, because that's how you do it. Or you don't leave a tip. Why would you leave a tip? Doesn't make any sense. Maybe you'll leave like a small coin on the table, but not 10, 20%, which is now also becoming standard in many places. Here's why. Imagine you're a restaurant owner in Prague and Americans show up and they'll tip you 20%. You'll be like, wow, that's pretty cool. And another couple will show up and again, they'll tip 25. We'll be like, whoa, that's really nice. And then my dad shows up. He'll only round up to the nearest number. We're like, whoa, what's going on here? I just had 2 Americans and they, improved my business. And you'll get used to it and you'll like it. No wonder, it's more money for the same thing. So you'll start to ask for it. So imagine you're a restaurant, coffee, bar owner in Prague, and you're getting all these different nationalities visiting. You get an American who will tip 20, 25%. Then the next day, 2 of us will show up and we'll tip 10%. And then somebody from Australia will tip nothing, or somebody from whatever country will tip nothing. And you as an owner will be shocked. You want those customers who tip more. So you'll set it as a rule. You'll start charging tip to everyone. You'll add it to the menu. You'll say, oh, we're gonna charge you 10%. We'll charge you extra this and then extra that. But then we will show up and we'll be like, wait, but why this is here? Like, we're not used to that. It creates this whole new era of confusion and chaos that has no rules. Everyone will tell and say something different. It's weird. Imagine a restaurant where there's food and there's no price at the end, and you'd be like, oh, so it's different like if you're from Australia or if you're from Czech or American, like everyone pays different because we all make different money and we come from different cultures. We've been doing this show for a while, and 10 years ago when we were making a video, we would say something different about tipping. We would probably say, well, mostly we round up and 10% is pretty generous. But the influence from US and all these terminals that people turn to you at coffee places and suddenly you see the amounts, how much you should tip, really left an effect on how much tip we leave. And just to be clear, I am very generous with tips and I hate the entire tipping culture. But if you've made it this far into the video and you see that we call ourselves guides, you probably want to know, how much do I tip when I travel to the Czech Republic? Well, 10% is great, but you can just ask, has the tip been already added to my bill? Can I tip you on the card? 10% is fine, and so on. Just talk to the people you're with, ask them. Just recently, we came across a problem in one of our maps we have on our Patreon, where there was a restaurant that we love, and we love to go there, but they were adding additional tip to foreigners only and not to us, which we were not pleased with because they know what a local, what a Czech will do. They know he or she will give some tip, but then they may have 2 foreigners and one will give a generous tip and the other one will not give any tip. Maybe because he or she is not used to it, or maybe someone told them, oh, in Czech Republic, they don't tip. So this restaurant automatically started to add tip to the bill, only to foreigners, which the 2 of us just don't find to be fair. Therefore, we removed the place from the map. But that all being said, I still kind of understand even the owner because he's being confused with all the confusion that is walking through his door. And one more thing that American viewers mentioned on our Instagram when they were saying, yeah, we give 20%, it wasn't with a smile on their face. It was, we tip 20% and more and we hate it. That being said, Of course they hate it. Everyone hates to pay more for a certain service. And I guess if the price was included in the meal, they would hate it even more, which, by the way, one study shows. I do hope that someone will bring order to this, from my point of view, chaos, because from tipping in hospitality, which is considered to be nice, to tipping in hospitals, which will be bribery, there's a very thin line. So let's not cross that line. Imagine undergoing a surgery and you'll go, I'll tip you 20% if you'll do the right job. And if you don't tip 20%, like... And now go to the comment section. Let's keep it polite. Let's keep it nice. Mention the country where you're from, mention the city where you're from, and tell us how much is the normal tipping standard where you live and how much you tip when you go abroad. I'm very curious. And as a bonus, I'll send our Czech viewers into the discussion here so they can shed some light how much they tip. Because to be honest, I was quite surprised when we asked them because I thought the norm was higher than what I found out. But maybe our viewers will have a different point of view. Thank you for watching. You can tip us by giving us the thumbs up, or you can go to our Patreon, but don't feel pressured. Do not feel pressured at all. I'll just be here for a while to see if you actually did go there. Okay, did you click 20 or 25%? Okay. No, don't feel pressured. Just a like is enough. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. And here's a Czech word at the end for you, so you can use it when you come to Prague, and that is spropitné, which means tip. Spropitné is a tip.